Hey guys, welcome to the show. So today I've got a really good friend of mine on, and her name is Jo Davis. Jo is one of those people that like really loves people. And I know it might sound a little bit weird because like there's a lot of people that love people, but she just has this real like sincere and authentic way of showing it. It's just through the quietness of her actions, and from me just seeing her because we attend the same church, and I've seen how she interacts with people and comes alongside people. And I'd call it a gift. I don't know what she would call it. I mean, she just calls it her heart and her genuine love. Um, we both attend the same church as I've mentioned, and in fact, I attended. I think your wedding, Jo, was it last summer?
Yes, last May.
Last May. So it's been just over a year.
Yes.
That's great, and I'm very good friends with her husband, Ollie, as well. So I've seen her bring encouragement and love to other people in the surroundings of church, and I also know she does a lot of that in her current work as well. So I wanted to bring her on just to share her story and to find out a little bit more about the type of things that drive Jo. So Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi.
Great. Hi. I'd love to just kind of go straight in here. Um, could you briefly maybe like summarize what your background is and maybe the things that have shaped you early on in your life?
In terms of formative moments, or
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of putting it.
um, I guess a number of things. I grew up in a number of different places. So my parents lived in South Africa for a while when I was young, and we lived in Nottingham, and then we lived in Surrey down south, which is the accent that stuck. And so partly, I think moving around and seeing different places and learning to build life in different places has shaped me, has made a difference to how I see the world and how I see the concept of home, which has also made a difference to where I see myself going in life.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, to be honest, is faith, because I started grappling with faith at quite a young age. So I chose to get baptized when I was 9, and then had a quite significant encounter with God when I was about 13, 14, which meant that I understood what He meant to me, and meant that, basically understood that he's personal, and that changed everything for me. So I'd say that's been the main thing that shaped my life since then, in terms of even who I've hung out with, what my focus has been in, even at school. I guess I've felt quite focused since then in terms of seeing people come to know God and creating space for that. So
Awesome.
yeah,
That's great.
and then that's kind of followed me through.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, I didn't know this. So South Africa, Nottingham, and then Surrey, all very exotic places in
in their own way.
In their own way. I mean, South Africa, what was that like for you, and how long were you there for? I mean, how much of it do you remember? I don't know how old you were at the time.
Oh, I was young then. So we came back when I was 6.
Okay.
And I was born just before we went. But then it's still, I mean, I remember a surprising amount of it, basically. And I think, it was fun. I've only been back once. So to go back again. But it obviously makes a difference. I think mostly moving around has made a difference, and living in different places, and also how that's affected how my parents see things, and learning that mostly it's hard to leave places, but you end up building something that feels better in the next place each time.
Sure. Yeah. And moving, and having had those different stages of living in different places, how do you think that's changed your concept of what home is for you?
Well, I think a lot of that definitely is formative in early years of going, I don't want to move, but I know the next place will be better. And you sort of, you let go of places a lot more from doing that process. But it was more on my year abroad as well, because I studied French and linguistics. So I did a year abroad in Paris. That a lot of that I felt that I needed to wrestle with that, and because I just missed home, especially the first 3 months. I didn't know what was going on, or really what my housing contract said, or how to open a bank account and things like that. And so it just makes you feel quite lonely when you don't have anything to fall back on, because in England you have, at least I understand the system culturally, so I know where to go if I have a question. Or my dad would know, so I can just call him. In France, he just doesn't know. So you start to just go, well, what is it that I'm actually craving when I'm feeling homesick, and what is home to me? And I really felt that I needed to not be dependent on a place, and that I guess that God was saying that home was where he's called me, home was where he is. And so trying to embrace that in a different way and actually be content with it, rather than, I guess, it being a nice idea.
Yeah.
But not actually true. And I noticed that in other people as well, actually, people who really did have a sense of conviction about where they were, and that they were somewhere where God had placed them and was with them. Then you sense a different type of home that isn't dependency on a place or people. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Yeah, sure. So, no, that's really good. The way that you explain that, like it really helped you really find the concept of home, and thinking about, what it is that means for you, the relationship, and is it the relationships, is it the familiarity, is it the comfort, those type of things, and it sounds like, well, you've identified that it's where God has called you to be at that moment. And I guess that's a really good a strong sign of what you mentioned earlier, where when you had that personal encounter with God, and that's really given you that focus from that point onwards in your life.
Yeah.
And so at that age, you said you were baptized at 9. So 13 was when you felt that God personally spoke with you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that, Joe, and what that experience was like?
Yeah, well, I think I'd definitely heard God speak to me before, and I therefore I decided, well, the decision to get baptized was really, I think it's true that Jesus has died for me, and that's about as much as I knew. But I thought that was enough. And then, but encountering, it was definitely encountering him in a different way when I was 13 that made it basically my identity, that made me realize, okay, this isn't something where Jesus has generically died for everyone, but it is something where he cares about me and knows actually who I am. And that was just kind of a few simple words that he said to me that I didn't know I needed to hear at the time, but that kind of changed everything about how I saw my relationships and what kind of what I needed from the world. Didn't realize I was looking for so much from other people and from the world. And then until that moment where it was kind of like God was saying, like, I can give that to you.
Sure.
So yeah.
That's great. And from that point onwards then, Joe, what would you say was the next maybe big decision or big crossroads that you encountered that really had God in it for you?
Quite a lot of things, I think, because there's different big stages in life since then, like going to uni and choosing a course, and again, a year abroad was, I guess, the decision wasn't necessarily, I wasn't necessarily hugely torn with the decision, because I'd always wanted that experience of living abroad, and always had in my mind that I would live abroad, and so saw a year abroad as a helpful kind of experiment. And yet that was something where it was definitely something that God was in a big way, because it's just an interesting experience where you go with nothing, and I guess going to uni was the same. I remember starting in similar place and praying similar prayers um, about building with God and seeing what that looked like and seeing what came of it and what that meant. So definitely felt like the opportunities I was given in France in that year were, were hugely as a result of God being in it. And are things that have continued to benefit me even in being able to use French in my work now and things like that, where if I hadn't have been a youth worker in France for that time, which I shouldn't have been able to be because I wasn't there for long enough, things like that where you really see, that builds your language skills hugely. So it was helpful. So things like that. And then in terms of making decisions, felt God speak quite clearly about my job and then about marriage as well. And the decision to get married, which I actually found quite a difficult one because I spent a while being single, coming to terms with being single and wanting to be okay if that was the rest of my life. I mean, I was still quite young. It was just what I felt I needed to process. And then I met Ollie, who's now my husband. And
Very good husband at that, I'm sure.
Exactly.
I know. A friend of mine too.
You've seen it. But that was something that I just found difficult to get my head around, then going, oh, okay, now I have to think about marriage and embracing marriage. And I've just persuaded myself that being single would be loads more effective.
That's so interesting. Could I ask more about that little tussle that you had, or big tussle, like that you had kind of, it's not, I don't know if you said you set yourself, but you were happy to be single, content. And then you felt like, no, God was saying, get married. Is that, I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, it was more that it was a relationship that made sense and I felt like he was in it. So then suddenly I had to wrestle with all the opposite things and go, okay, well, what's good about marriage then? And I guess I didn't want to assume any of those things. I think a lot of those things can be assumed, especially in a Christian world, that marriage is the ultimate dream. So I didn't want to walk into things that way. So I really wanted to understand why and what the value of it was. But that was a journey that took quite a while. And in the end, it's kind of a scary decision as well, isn't it? And there was, but helpfully was made simple by, a day when I was just, we were out walking and I was basically just talking out loud to myself, and was suddenly really aware of the fact that God is he is as present in a moment in 10 years time as he is in this moment now. And so basically he knows what's going to happen and where we're going to go and what's going to be good for us. So I just went, well, what is the best outcome in this relationship? What do you want? And I mean, relationships are never that simple, but I just felt him say, what if the two of you just focused on, what if the two of you just worked out what it means to be pure in heart and to be faithful for the rest of your lives together? Would that be enough for you? And that was quite clearly the question, like, is this enough for you, basically? Which is pretty countercultural as a question in itself, but so it did kind of strike me, and that it basically turned out that was the question I needed to answer, and that then made it make sense. It's like, that's actually enough of a reason for me, and the decision to get married is a decision to say, this is enough for me, and I'm going to choose that. So yeah, it was a helpful question that made me understand marriage.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing, Joe. Like, such a different perspective, right? Because I know there are a lot of people out there who focus on, well, getting into a relationship is about, do I like that person? It's the feelings based thing. It's that, and you very much had to be convinced of that, or even if you had feelings, that was like, yeah.
I did like Ollie.
Yeah, it wasn't purely logical and rational choice. That
Yeah.
it just made sense.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I
and
probably make it sound a lot like that.
that adjustment then, did that happen in an instant for you once you kind of decided and had that conversation with God and felt, yeah, okay, you've got peace about it, and then it's just you know, because switch, it's like a 180 switch, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, now I'm gonna be married. Like, or was there even during the relationship and even maybe even after getting married that there are certain things you have to adjust in your head about from the position that you were in before, what you were thinking before for your life?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think to some extent you do have to be prepared to slow down and slow down on the journey that you're on, because that's always the case involving more people or even doing things as a team in any context. You kind of have to slow down for the sake of going together. So that's, I think that probably still is an adjustment from what I had in mind for my life, I guess. And yet, well, yeah, and definitely going through a relationship, it was a gradual process of giving Ollie a hard time, essentially, about why marriage was a bad idea.
Are you asking him
Then,
every day?
yeah, and then until that moment, really, and that moment was a bit of a 180 switch, and I was like, oh, I get it now. And we could start working towards that, but that was about a year and a half in
Yeah.
of dating.
Great.
You're like, wow, what a guy.
What a guy, Michael. So, I want to ask about your current work then, because you work for an organization called Fusion. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that? And again, I know that will be because of the background that you've shared, as it would have played a massive part in why you're doing what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about Fusion and your role and why you do that?
Yes. Yes. So Fusion is an organization where we're basically connecting students with church and then training churches to work well with students. But it's an organization with a big vision, because we want to see churches basically excel in working with students, seeing students come to faith across the world. And we've just started in the UK. I guess that's the idea.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's exciting for me, because that is kind of more my vision, and especially Europe. Europe generally, rather than just the UK, partly because of that concept of home. It's like home isn't necessarily here, but yes. So that's the goal of Fusion, and my role within that is that I'm based in Manchester, and we kind of have a region that we look after. So we're traveling up and down the west of the country a lot of the time, lots of miles racked up, and that is spending time with student workers, so people who are employed or volunteer or whatever, to look after student ministries and churches. And we're trying to train them. We are trying to help them stay sharp and be brilliant at what they do, get alongside them, but also spending time with the students in those churches to help equip them essentially to see themselves as missionaries in their context and actually engage with what God's doing in their university and that time of life for them, because we think it's important. We think universities are well, it's an important time of life because it sets you up for where you're going. Essentially, it's where you start to make your own decisions in a more dramatic way, and also a time when you're basically free to explore faith and take it up or drop it, and because of the independence of it. So yeah, we want churches to be engaging with those people and recognizing that they're actually in their city as well.
Yeah.
So it's very relational, because we I guess we bring what's useful for the churches themselves. So we have to know a lot of people all at once. And then we also raise our salaries. So that's also knowing a lot of people all at once, and people who want to give to the vision of what we're doing, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's the additional challenge of raising your own funding, getting sponsorship to get your salary, so you can, live while doing that job.
Yes, basically. but it's good fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, adventure for sure.
Yes.
What would you say, like, what challenges you about that role and about what you do, connecting students with churches and working with students and all of that?
I do definitely find it challenging. I think partly that there's always more to do.
Mm.
So you're, and I guess, you know, there's generally speaking about 1% of students who are in church, which can feel like a daunting thing to know when you're trying to make church more accessible and you want every student to have a chance to make that decision essentially and to be invited. And yet the stats are kind of working against us still. So one challenge is just having hope that and maintaining that, because that's what we want to share with people when we go to churches, because the church actually isn't always a hopeful place and there are definitely people who have given up. And so our challenge often is to go in and share the vision that we have and share our hope with these people. And therefore you have to maintain hope yourself, which can be difficult because it doesn't always look like uni culture and uni life is going in a helpful direction.
Yeah.
And yet we believe that God speaks something else over it, and that He is speaking, you know, a better plan, a better word over it, and that's what we have to constantly tap into in our own lives. So I guess there's loads of personal work to do in order to be good at the job, which is a challenge in itself as well. That because we're investing in local churches across the country, we want to invest in local churches locally, as in terms of your own church. And that's just, and then also you're sharing hope and you're sharing your prayers for a generation. So you have to then be cultivating that personally. And that it's a fun challenge, but it is a challenge because you have, even just time-wise, just practically doing
Yeah.
all that. But you do have to do all that to be genuine and to do it well. So I think
Yeah.
those are challenges. And if I'm not in a good space, and if I don't particularly feel like I have faith that day that God's going to do what He said He was going to do, then you're not really taking anything useful to anyone.
Mm.
So it's a challenge to be in the right place.
Mm. It's such a, you know, the way you describe it is such a special job because it's not one that you can really compartmentalize, can you? You can't say
Yeah.
it's a 9 to 5 and I'll take that hat off at 5 o'clock, I'll clock off and I'll go home and I'll do something else. It's, you know, as you're saying, it's so important that you're like cultivating those personal habits for you and that personal relationship, because that is what you are, that is the opportunity that you're presenting
Yeah.
all day, every day in your workplace.
Yeah.
So that integrity is so important for you. And also it's where you're going to get your energy from, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Investing in students locally is where you get your inspiration from to do it elsewhere as well.
Mm,
So
so
you have
good.
to do both.
Yeah. So you just fully in.
Yeah, basically. You're fully in or you're not at all.
Right. Maybe just a slight digression here, but on the work that you do, Joe, what have you seen that's like in terms of the students themselves? What have you observed that's noticeable for you?
In terms of where students are at, what they're like.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a long time since I've been a student. I'm just kidding. How have things changed?
Well, it even feels like it's been a long time since I've been a student, to be honest. And that was I graduated 4 years ago, so it's actually not that long. But it is definitely like things change fast in the student world. And it's a new generation that are the 18-year-olds now. So there's all that side of it, the cultural side of it, which is very interesting and challenging as well. I think that even compared to when I was a student, like social media addiction is a thing. and quite a rife thing that people are and would say that I'm addicted to social media, which is something I wouldn't have known that was possible really when I was at uni. Even though we had Facebook, and of course you procrastinate, but you're not obsessed in the same way. And that then obviously has loads of other knock-on effects of to some extent superficiality and needing to be entertained, obviously very broadly speaking, but as a culture that again were different for me. And all then mental health things, which you can't say are a direct effect. There's lots of things going on there, but it's got to be intertwined somehow. Where that would now be, well, even a few years ago, that was like 80% of students would say they struggle with some sort of mental health issues, and that was a few years ago in US studies, so it would be a lot higher now. So that's interesting about student culture. What's also interesting, I mean, what's most encouraging for me is to find the students that that just get it basically, and that actually just love Jesus, and that shapes how they do uni life, and seeing the huge potential of that and how that can impact the people around them is still what is most encouraging. And sometimes it's the most unlikely people, but I met a guy in Birmingham who'd come to we do small group training, so we're helping basically equipping students to lead small groups that multiply and that thrive. And this guy had come to it who had started a small group, so just looking at the Bible, looking at faith, with his American football team, because he decided he needed to give up American football because it was he felt like it was becoming it was taking up all his time, and it was basically his priority over church. So he felt challenged about it and gave it up, and explained to his coach why. And his coach felt so he was just so struck by it that he would have that level of integrity and make a decision like that. He goes, oh, okay. And then after a while, persuaded him to come back and join the team, and said, we'll work around your church commitments. You don't have to play on a Sunday and do this and that, but we want you on the team. And can you explain to everyone about your faith, because that's just fascinating, that's so important to you. Wow. And so he had to share about his faith before practice one time, and just explain to people why it was important to him. And then so many of them wanted to hear more afterwards. They just had to set up a group that happens before practice every week, which is just cool. Things like that, where it's just partly where you remember how simple it is, but also where you see the potential in 18-year-olds, I guess.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then that happened because he took faith-based action.
Yes.
Stepping out, and because it's not easy, right? I assume in those environments, in American football, peer pressure, just the fear of being judged, the fear of not being accepted for this. And that he went all out, and that's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it's cool.
Great. Encouraging. So, Joe, let's change direction, and there's a couple more things here, really, because what I know from what you've told me, going into your personality, you've mentioned two, Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram, and you've given me your what you are for each of those things.
I've given you everything, Andy. You know it all.
ENFP for Myers-Briggs. Briefly, what is that, and how does knowing that about you help you?
So the way I understand ENFP is partly that a disproportionate amount of Christian leaders are ENFP. Okay. But also that, and most of the fusion team actually, weirdly. So that's interesting. But it's essentially the one without structures and lines, in a sense that the P is like everything's pretty open-ended, and most plans are more like ideas than plans. And then the N is similar, where it's like not really building from what you've already done, but picking ideas out of the sky, that sort of thing. And concepts, I love a concept. So love a concept.
The more vague it is, the better.
Yeah, exactly. But it's helped me to know what I need to work on, and mostly it's helped me to understand other people and where there's miscommunication, because that happens in team, but it happens in marriage as well. That I think we've come up with an idea for what we're going to do on Friday night, but Ollie thinks it's a plan and we're definitely doing it, and then I feel trapped by his plan. That's just a P&J. So it helps me understand those things, and I think it helps you draw people out where you're like, oh, okay, I get, especially blue sky thinking. Sometimes you're in meetings and they're entirely blue sky thinking, and some people are just entirely lost. So it helps you draw those people out better to go, okay, let's remember what we've done so far and think about what we're building on. Things like that I've found helpful. So mostly the team interaction stuff.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
I enjoy that. Yeah, that is good. Because when you're able to understand yourself, you're then able to see the contrast between yourself and other people.
Yeah.
And just knowing that helps you to be more, to adjust to relationships and to communicate in a way that, okay, well, I'm different. I see things this way. You see things that way. Right. So I just said I might have wanted pizza. I didn't actually say I wanted pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Calm down. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely helpful, the self-awareness thing. And then I can't remember what I was going to say then. I think it's understanding how other people work. Yeah. I can't remember what I was going to add, so don't worry.
Well, then the other thing you mentioned was the Enneagram. And, and this is another kind of fascinating piece of kind of profiling where there are 9 numbers. And you're a number 3. And each number generally has like a wing. So there's numbers either side of it. And it's like you're primarily that number. And the terminology is that you have a wing, which is either side. So you're a 3 with a 4 wing. What does that mean? And how does that help you?
It's a good question. And it has actually helped me a lot. I've only recently discovered the Enneagram, but I've been reading up about it quite a bit. I found it quite intimidating because you do have to read about it to know about it. That's why I didn't get into it for ages. But okay, 3 with a 4 wing. So 3 is, there's so many different aspects to it, aren't there? Because it's like your emotion center. The main thing I found helpful about it is the motivations stuff, and it kind of peels you back, doesn't it? And it's like, by the way, this is what drives you. And so those moments you find difficult, this is why. And the points of growth in it I find very helpful as well. So it's been especially helpful in this last season where we've had I work very closely with another 3, and he's quite different to me because he's probably the 2 wing, so he's far more target focused and like, let's just bash everything out and get it done, whereas when I write lists, I don't like to be defined by them, so then I do everything that's not on the list, which is probably not that helpful. But anyway, but basically we both applied for the team leader role for our team, and yet we're both quite driven to achieve in a sense, and our job already frames that differently, because achievement looks like basically helping other people thrive. So that really rewires quite a lot about you, but and how you go about things. But it just introduced an element of competitivity into our relationship where we both respond and are competitive. So that was interesting to navigate, and learning about the Enneagram at the same time helped me go, okay, this feels vulnerable to me because I'm going for something where I could fail, and I could basically see lots of reasons why he would get it. So it's like, the safest thing to do is to just not go for it. But so it was really helpful to peel all that back and go, what is going to be best for me is to go for it, and and then work this out relationally with him and all the rest of it. So noticing that fear in myself and noticing then the process to do after that, and things like that I found very helpful. And how you respond to stress, the Enneagram unpacks that a lot, which is really helpful. And I hadn't realized that I have no idea how I feel until listening to this. And at first I was like, that's so rude, I know how I'm doing, thank you. And then I was like, oh, I've got no idea. But I know how everyone else is doing, so I just trick myself that I know. So that's very helpful. It means that I just do more work on taking time to figure that out and write stuff down.
And I love that. What would you say has been the biggest benefit then of knowing that about yourself and all those things you've just mentioned?
I think it's a lot of things, but it does definitely go deeper than the Myers-Briggs stuff, because in a sense it is less about understanding how other people work, so you can never quite figure out what Enneagram someone else is, can you? Because it's their motivation. So and yet it makes a big difference to your relationships. So Ollie and I figuring out therefore how we can bring out the best in each other has been really helpful. And yeah, really it's the growth points and going, I mean, I've journaled a lot since I was a teenager, but I guess probably done that less in the last year. So going, oh, actually that's quite fundamental for me to know where I am. And I think and really it's the ambition, and it's given me a tool to then discern better between what's healthy ambition and what's unhealthy ambition, because there's definitely two sides to that. But recognizing that in myself, so it's not a bad thing in itself, but you can definitely pursue that unhealthily.
It's good. No, really good, Joe, because I'm an Enneagram through the falling as well. You put us side by side and you might not be able to, be surprised. How can you two be the same? It's just an amazing tool, and I love the way that you said it. It's so much of it is unseen. It's very hard to diagnose somebody else and say you're that number. It also requires so much self-honesty with yourself too.
Yeah,
it really brings up those icky things. You have to look at yourself in the mirror really closely and just be honest. And that's the only way you're going to get the most out of it. And then there's the understanding of, okay, so these things are really exposed. Like, it can feel quite exposing the more you dig into it.
Yeah.
But not to self-judge, right?
Yeah.
That it's not there. It's not there as a thing to beat yourself and to make you feel like this big afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's almost to recognize that, look, these are things that you've developed over time, and that once you know about it, you have a choice. Like, you didn't know you were doing it, but once you know that this is what was pushing you and driving you, you can now be more empowered to do something else. Like, your example was a great one. Competing with a colleague for getting this job, realizing why you wanted to do it started to make you wonder, should you be doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
It's like, I love the Enneagram, Joe, and it is fascinating.
It is.
That's so good. Joe, thank you so much for your time. I have just one last question before you leave.
Okay.
How do you intend to increase your impact going forward?
It's a big question to finish.
A big one.
Well, in a sense, that is literally what we're always trying to do, because my job is basically entirely about impact and catalyzing other people. And so that's what we're aware of. Even delivering material and training material is only going to have an impact if we bring it in a certain way, and if we're in a certain place, if we're passionate about it as well. So that is my aim in the day to day, is to have more impact. And given what I do, my focus this year in order to have more impact is actually something which seems quite opposite to what would be helpful, but it's far more well, I guess, yeah, it's just focusing on God and building in time to hear his voice, hear his words over what we're doing, and to pray his prayers, because it can also be very fast paced and traveling to lots of different places, and you end up just getting it done, which means that you don't have as much of an impact as you could. So my aim this year is to do a lot less just getting it done, and a lot more I guess approaching things more deeply. And I want to journey it more deeply this year, essentially, even all the different tasks and trainings that we're doing, the conversations we have. And that's the plan. And I mean, worst case is that we end up getting less done, but hopefully at least we do the things that we do better and with more impact. That's the trade-off. We're planning on getting more done and doing it better, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, have the best of both worlds.
Exactly. It's over ambitious, but that's where we like to be.
That's great. Jo, thank you so much for your time. It's been really good getting to know you. And we'll hang out soon, I'm sure.
Yes, that'd be great. Thanks, Andy.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.